Welcome to Whatif tutorials. In this tutorial I'll be talking about the layout of a quote in plain paper. There's also a layout of quotes for pre-printed forms, but at this point we will be talking about starting with plain paper. First of all, let me show you what the quote looks like, and then we'll come back to the layout options. We go to quotes. Here are the existing quotes. I'll pick quote number 6 and print quote. These are the printing options which determine what sort of quote we're going to print. In this case, we are printing the quote layout including GST, showing quote totals, and as I just said, including GST, system generated, that is plain paper, as opposed to a pre-printed. And the layout code, there is only one layout code that matches those criteria, and we will choose that. Okay. So here is the quote. Let me go through the sections of the quote first of all. When layout options are considered, we need to think in terms of sections of the quote. Here is your company name, your company details that you have entered in the utilities, your company logo, which you have referred to in the utilities. This is the label, quote label. This is the quote number and the date. This is generally speaking regarded as the header section of the quote. This is the bill address, the delivery address, and this section here is the preamble, that is where you are addressing the person you're sending the quote to. Attention Joe Blogs, Dear Joe, and the preamble that you have set up in the quote layout, which we'll get to shortly, appears here. The next section of the quote is the quote column headings, and these are also subject to layout options. After the quote heading, we are in the extended area of the font, that is where items, description, quantity and values are entered. The end of quote text here is an optional one, it need not be shown. Down the bottom of the quote we have the footer section or the total section. The footer section has at the foot of it a 3-line remark section which can be tailored for your requirements, or which you can tailor, I should say, to your requirements. Here we have the delivery, salesperson, terms. Now all of these items on the quote page here can be moved around, and the text can be changed. So that is what we'll be looking to shortly. Let me draw your attention to the actual extension section of the quote. You'll see here reference to item code, description. One of the options you have is to go with no item code, in which case the description enlarges to fit that space there. You can also change the width of the item and therefore the description. The total width of this area here, the code plus the description, is fixed. The discount column, if there is no discount, then there will be no discount heading. It'll simply be a blank column. Okay, and there is at the foot of the quote there is a reference to the page and the number of pages. One of the options in the quote is to set the parameters whereby the system guesses the number of pages that is to be printed. It might say here 1 of 2, when in fact there aren't two. So in that case, you may need to revise the parameters, and that's what we're going to look at shortly. So let me just exit out of here without printing. We'll go back to our main quotes menu, and now we'll look at the options to alter those layout details. Click Layouts, click System Generated Quote Layouts. You'll notice first of all there are two options in the menu: View Your Designs and Default Designs. There are two designs that come with Whatif. One is for excluding GST and one is for including GST. If you click on Default, these are the ones that come with Whatif and cannot be changed. If you click on View Your Designs, these are the ones that you can change, and in fact you can add a new design to the two that are already there. These two designs here are exactly the same as the default designs there when you start Whatif. If you start making changes, whoops, didn't mean to do that. If you start making changes to these designs, they will not change the default designs. To create a new design, you can in fact copy from either a default design or from one of your existing designs. Okay, first of all, I'd like to show you the options for the layout of the quote, or some of them. Click Edit. Okay, each layout has a code. You can change this code if you wish, if it's more meaningful to you. You have the option to show totals on each page. Where there's only one page in a quote, of course the totals would be shown normally at the bottom. Where there are two pages, you can elect not to show it on the first page and just show it on the second page. Otherwise, if you say yes, that will repeat the totals on each page, even though on the first page there's only certain items and on the next page there's the rest of the items. Next, you have the option to show or not show the item code. As mentioned a while back, if you say no item code, then the description will be that much bigger. This is just for your own information. You can put some reference here to what you want to use it. You might have several designs that you've created, each a bit different and used for slightly different purposes. The quote prices are for this design or for any design either include or exclude GST. So the prices will either, if you say no, the prices will be before GST, and if you say yes, the prices will be inclusive of GST. Now, I mentioned a bit earlier that the system tries to calculate the number of pages when it prints a quote. It takes a guess based on the quote lines that are there and the various different types of lines. In order to do that, it uses these parameters. It says, well, if we're not using a code, then there are a certain number of characters that will take up the description on average per line. If we are using the code, then the description is reduced and therefore we'll have a lesser number of characters there. And finally, we take an average of the number of lines that can be printed on a page. So by experimenting with these, you may find you will get the perfect estimate of page numbers done by the system. Finally, you can print end of quote, yes or no at the foot. This is simply to bring users' attention to the fact that the quote's details have finished. Margins and spacing for the quote, you can specify the top margin and you can specify the left margin, and all measurements are in inches. So this is 0.56 of an inch And you can also specify the item column width. And as mentioned, this will then be compensated in the description width automatically. Finally, we have a subtotals text section here. You can, in your quote, you can group items 1, 2, 3, say, and make a subtotal after them. And then go on to other items, 4, 5, 6, and make a subtotal after that. And then, of course, you'll have your grand total, which comes automatically. This is simply to describe the headings, because the headings for the total excluding tax, freight excluding tax, add GST, subtotal value including GST, you can change all of these around. Obviously, if this is an inclusive of GST, then this would be different. This would have to be subtotal of items including GST, and so on. Okay, so those are the main options which change the layout of the quote as we saw it. The next thing I want to deal with is the preamble. Very quickly, the preamble appears as we saw on the quote before you get on to the actual extended details. So you can put anything you like in here, and that'll be the standard preamble to appear on every quote, or on every quote that uses this design. Okay. Now this section here, layout details, this looks fairly busy. It's pretty simple really. Every item that appears on the quote basically is either text or data or an image. The logo is a good example of an image. So we saw on the quote that the logo was there. That's an image. The company name is data. This comes from your details in your setup utilities, the company details, and likewise the address box, which contains the address and phone, email, fax, etc., also comes from the company details in this setup in utilities. This is data. Now we look at the quote label itself. That label is text. The quote number. That's the quote, big quote label. Then there is a smaller label for the quote number, which is also text, and then we have the quote number itself, which is data. So all of the things that appear on the quote are referred to are either image, data, or text, and all of the ones that are there at standard are base. There are some user-defined options down the bottom here which can be used or added. They don't appear on the quote now, but they are there, but they are invisible. So let's look at how we manage this information on the quote. So we'll take the company name as an example. It's visible. We know it's data and base. This is fixed. You can't amend any of this stuff. Now there's an alignment. Normally text is left aligned. Then there are coordinates. The top, where it sits on the page, the top measurement. Then there's the left measurement, then there's the width, and then there's the height. All of these are inches. So when you look at the company name on the quote, it'll be sitting in a position determined by these coordinates. So if you wanted to amend where company name sits, you simply point to company name, go edit, and at the bottom here you can see where it's sitting now. You simply amend those, and then if you look back at the quote, you will see how the company name has moved on the quote. Now the other big thing you need to be aware of in terms of how the quote layout looks is the font. Now every single item on here has its own reference to its font, the font style and the size. These can all be changed, and I'll show you in a minute how to change them en masse rather than having to go in and edit every single one of these to change them. Okay, so I think that concludes our look at all of this. As I mentioned earlier, there are user-defined ones. If you want to add something that is not already on the quote in the way of text, you can simply make one of these visible and change the coordinates. You can see here the coordinates are all putting them in the one position on the quote, so they're sitting there on top of one another at 1, 1, 1, 1, like a box. It's simply a matter of editing this bit, one of these, saying edit and making it visible, and then changing these coordinates so that it appears on the quote exactly where you want it. If it's text, of course, that you're putting on the quote, then you indicate the text here. If it's data, then you change the type to data, and you can look in here to see the sort of data options you have that you can put on the quote. But we won't do that. We'll change this back to text, and we'll leave all of this, and we'll say visible no. Okay, so that is the layout details. We've covered that, we've covered the preamble. Now the fonts, and this is the last bit. You can see here over on this side that there's fonts sort of arranged in sections. There's the company name, the big heading at the top, the address box, quote label, then there's a font for general items in the header, there's that specific fonts for the delivery and bill address, there's fonts for the preamble, there's fonts for the column headings, and there's fonts for the footer. If you want to change one of these, you can change it by selecting the new font here and clicking apply and then OK. This will change all of the items which are covered by these particular headings here. Then if you wish, you can go back into the layout details, which we were just in, and then edit or change some of the fonts back to what you want if they are not what you want, having done the font changes here. On the left hand side here we have the same options to select the font for the extended items. So the extended details, you've got your item code, description, the item description of the header, description comments, description dimensions, long description, quantity, price, and so these are your columns in effect. And within your description area you can have comments, so that's why we've got reference to comments. It's also within your description area you can have dimensions and long description, so all of those can be different as specified here. Okay, I think that covers the layout options. That's the end of the tutorial. Thank you.